Hello everyone, it is time to talk about plot, which is another important part to stories. So plot, we'll talk about today the sequence or order that great stories follow, and the pattern of what different actions happen and when in stories. Quick review, all stories have setting, time and place, character, the protagonist, antagonists sometimes, and plot. So what is plot? It's all the action. It's everything that happens in the story. Plot can also talk about the order those events happen in. So when you look at nearly every story, they follow a similar plot sequence or pattern. There are events that happen in order to make a story. I'm going to show these events on what we call a plot diagram. So if you imagine that the story kind of follows along this diagram, and I'll explain each different parts that happen. So first we've got the exposition, which is the background. That gives the background of the characters, who they are, where they live. It kind of sets up what's going to happen in the story. Then, eventually, the character usually runs into a conflict. Maybe it starts out as a small conflict, maybe it's a disagreement with another character, maybe it's an internal conflict, could be external. But those conflicts usually keep getting more complicated, and that's where we call the rising action, where things are getting more exciting in the story and things are building. Until finally it gets to the climax, which is the most exciting part of the story. That's where it's usually right at the biggest conflict, the biggest problem that's going on just before it gets solved. It gets very exciting, and then it's solved, and the action begins to fall toward the resolution, which is the end of the story where kind of everything gets solved and it heads sort of to a normal area. After that, can usually go into an epilogue, which is where a little section of the story where it says this is what happened.
Hello, and welcome to Mr. D Says, Episode 1. Today I'll be talking to you about the parts of a story. You may remember in class that I've talked to you about the fact that stories pose problems. They put forward some sort of question, and ultimately the end of the story will give us some sort of solution to that problem or an answer to the question. In the past, the way that I've best liked to represent this is with a little line that looks something like this. And this is what I call my plot roller coaster. The plot roller coaster is basically a line that represents the plot or the storyline and how it moves visually. Now, I realize looking at it right now, it looks like a little mountain and a big mountain, and in fact, that's what they are. But each of these little bumps in the road represents something in a story. We're going to start with the introduction. Now, the introduction is the very beginning of the story here. This is the part of the story where we introduce our characters, we introduce our narrator, and we have an idea of where the story is taking place or when. Take, for instance, the story of The Lord of the Rings, where we start off in a place called Middle-earth, and the first characters that we meet all have hairy feet and are things called hobbits. Now, that's something we want to know early on, and we don't want to be finding out later on in the story. So we put it here in the introduction. That gets us started. But we still need a problem in order to have a story, and that generally comes in right around here with the inciting incident. The inciting incident is that bump in the road that sort of sets the story in motion. It takes us from simply talking.
Plot. A plot is the sequence of actions and events connected to the main project in a story. The plot usually involves one or more conflicts, which may be external or internal. A project may be to find love, escape war, save a relationship, escape suffering, find happiness, or even save the world. The plot will be the main actions taken to complete the project. Example. In Lord of the Rings, the main plot is, simply put, to find the Ring of Evil and carry it to its place of final destruction. In a love story, two people may decide to go on a journey to get to know each other better. What happens on this journey to bring them closer together will be the plot. A plot may be packed with action or deal with personal changes.